everyone, welcome. Hi everyone, welcome to Personal Project Standardization. We're just going to wait till I can admit everybody in. Yep. Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Personal Project Standardization and Moderation. This meeting will be recorded and that will go up in the IB Educator chat that Lenny Dutton has set up for us. If you would just like to use the chat function, we'll just do a little bit of sort of some meeting protocols right now. If you would just like to use the chat function, you're more than welcome to say hi to everybody there, but we're looking at between 50 and 100 people, so some things get lost if sort of you say hello to everybody there. Please feel free to use that for questions. I'll try to see those in the chat and try to answer those as we go through. It's just me who's doing both the monitoring of admitting people and asking questions as well as running the meeting. So that can be a little bit overwhelming, but it's fine. For those who don't know me, my name is Amber Reinhardt. I'm the Personal Project Coordinator at Lincoln Community School in Accra, Ghana. I've been working with the MYP, I'm in MYP schools for about 2 decades. I'm a workshop leader in Category 3, Category 2, and Category 1, all different workshops from developing the NYP 2 projects. I'm also an INS and a Lang & Lit teacher as well. I've been the Personal Project Coordinator for about 15 years. So I've been working with a personal project for quite a long time. So I just want to, I'm going to share my screen with you and sort of go through what I would like this, how I would like this to go. And we'll see how it goes. So we have about 40 minutes. And we will get started. So what I thought we would do is I thought we'd go over a little bit about the personal project and why we standardize, why we moderate our personal projects, and then go from there. Just a reminder that you guys have access to, here we go, the Padlet. This is the personal project Padlet that we set up straight from the beginning. I'll make sure that you guys have access to this in the chat. I'll just put that right in the chat right now so you guys can see that. And this is where you can ask your questions here. So any questions that you have, just please put this right in this pink box here. On the Padlet, the presentation that I'm doing is in a PDF form. And it's right here with those questions as well. We'll be using some of these documents that are on the Padlet as we get to the standardization, and I will make sure that you have access to those. Let me just admit everybody here, and then we'll go from there. So let's start and begin. So personal project standardization and moderation. There's two different aspects to this. Standardization is when we work in schools to standardize work, to make sure that we understand what the criteria is and what the command terms mean and what different levels mean for the personal project or even within our subject areas. Standardization is sort of the practice for us to make sure that when we go and we do our own marking or our own grading, that we have a common understanding of that. Moderation for the personal project is when schools, excuse me, get together and moderate their students' final reports, and now those are the scores that get sent off to the IB for that for those moderation, and that's what the examiners look at as our final scores and to see how well we understand them. This is going to, I apologize for this. Okay, so those are the differences, which is, so what's the purpose of, can you guys see the, can you guys see all these pictures here? Can you guys see all this? This is what I'm increasing. Okay, I know you can see all these as well. All right, so what's the purpose of it? Well, the personal project allows students to demonstrate their ability to connect and transfer the extended skills, knowledge, and understandings they've acquired in one or more of their MYP disciplines to a global context in order to achieve a meaningful goal of their own design. So the idea of the personal project is that we see skills, knowledge, and concepts all come together. It is the culminating assessment of the middle years program, right? We have that with the PYP, we have that with the DP, and we have that with the CP. So each one of the 4 IB programs has their own culminating assessment. Some people say that it's the only true summative assessment of the MYP, that the summative assessments that we do in our courses really sort of are more formative than they are summative, and this is building up all to the personal project, where we sort of see all of the ATL skill categories assessed for our students. It's a sustained self-directed inquiry. They make their own goal, they choose their own topic, and it can be over, depending on how your school does it, about 7 or 8 months of time. Again, demonstrates those skills, knowledge, attitudes, and concepts. Students are applying and analyzing the ATL skills, and it is aligned with quite a few of our standards and practices. These are the new standards and practices from the IB, but at least all 4 of them, that these moderation, personal project, and standardization are all aligned with those practices. We'll let in a few more and continue. Oh, so why do we standardize? Well, we want to promote consistency. We want to have consistency with our marking, whether that's in the personal project or within our own subjects. We want to have common understanding about how our rubrics work, how our criteria works, what each level, what is an 8, how does that differ from a 4, right? How does state different than outline, right? We want to have a best practice to apply a common interpretation of assessment criteria in their strands. And understand that each command term has a common meaning, right? That we understand what these command terms mean and that they matter. And this idea that we are consistent and fair, whoever marks the work, right? That we come to a same level, no matter who marks it, no matter what student that is, because an unfair advantage is an unfair disadvantage as well. Oops. So the idea is that when we look at criterion levels, we're looking at best fit. And we'll talk about what that looks like in just a minute. But the idea is that there's different strands within our levels, and that we want to make sure that each one of those strands gets a different level and that we come to then a holistic level, which is here. We'll talk about these in just a minute because they may get different levels for each one of those strands, and then what does that look like for the individual criterion. So what I thought that we would do now is you're more than welcome to follow along as I do this too with your own screen, if that's easier for you. But I'd like you please to then go to the Padlet, and we're going to be looking at just Criterion A today. We don't have a lot of time. And I really just want to focus on Criterion A. And then this is a piece of standardized work from the IB. And you are more than welcome to download this yourself. And we're going to look at this on my screen in just a minute. Let me admit some more people here. Hey, welcome everyone. We are just in the beginning of the standardization. Okay, so if you look at this piece, how I do is I start this is I have my workup, I have the students workup, and then I have the criterion as well. And so by criterion A, what we're looking for criterion A, and specifically strand 1, is really, really complex. It's looking at 4 different aspects just for criterion A, strand 1. And I find that this is really, it's time consuming, but it's really important that we break down the criteria and we break down the strands. What is in each of those strands? And for criterion A, strand 1, does anybody have any idea You can put those in the chat there, but what those 4 strands are. Does anybody know? Sorry, does anybody know what the 4 things that Criterion A strand 1 looks like? You can put that in the chat. Does anybody know? And if you can't hear me, you have to add your audio yourself. That's on the lower left-hand side. Does anybody know what 4 things that we see in Criterion A strand 1, the 4 aspects that we're looking at to score? Good, those are 3, absolutely. Global context, the goal, and the personal interest. And does anybody know the 4th aspect? Challenging, absolutely, right? And this is what's so difficult about this, is that it's the goal, it's the global context, it's the personal interest, and then it's the challenge of that, right? So you're looking at 4 different aspects just for one strand, right? Which makes it really, really, really difficult and challenging for us as moderators, but also to make sure that our students understand how they're being scored as well. So we have these 4 aspects. And the other thing that we need to look at when we look at scoring is not only what are we scoring, but how are we doing that? What does it mean when these descriptors here? What is the difference between state and outline and develop, and then develop a highly challenging goal? So these things are really, really important when we go and we look at the work, is to understand what are the command terms asking us to do, and then what are we looking for when we look at that work. So I always like to sort of go over again the command terms and to understand what I'm looking for when I go and do that. All right, let me just bring in some more people. And then let's go back to the work. So here, I think if I download this, I can look at this myself. Oh yeah, I have a copy here. So what I've done here is I've already started to highlight some of the work, some of the students' work. So for instance, when I go through, I say, okay, so I'm looking at personal interest, global context, goal, and then the challenge. So when I was first introduced to the personal project, I immediately knew that I wanted to do something related to art, because after starting my current school, my interest in art kept increasing, and I was always motivated by my art teacher, Mrs. Moore. So already we're starting to see some of that personal interest. So that here is yellow. So I've got sort of, here we go, for interest in art, motivated by art teacher. I would like to know a little bit more. What I like to do when I'm reading personal projects is also to see sort of how individualized it is, and how really personal it is, and how much detail is there. If I can change out my interest in mechanics and another art, like different teacher, then I'm really saying, actually, this could be used for any personal project. So the specificity of what the student is including will help raise the levels of those as well. Okay. We've got a few more coming in. So already I've got, okay, so they've got, we know that they're interested in art. How is that related to the goal? I decided to use art in this project as a way of raising awareness to a problem, and I wanted this problem to be global and up to date, so everyone in our school could relate to it, even though they do not suffer from the problem themselves. All right, already I have some red flags and alarm bells going off. One, because of the goal of raising awareness. I like how students want to raise awareness of issues, but they need to be able to measure that. And oftentimes when I see something like raise awareness, I want to make sure that that one comes out in the criteria, their success criteria. I want to make sure it comes out with a goal, and I want to make sure that they were able to answer that. Already I'm not even sure what the student is raising awareness about or how they're using art. I don't know what the problem is. So again, that specificity, I have issues with that. All right. Sorry, people are trying to answer questions. I can't quite see. Okay, so there's a question here. Do I have evidence of the product? A reminder that what students put forth, and that's in C1 for evidence of the product, is only 30 seconds of video, 5 photographs, or 1 A4 piece of text. As moderators, like as an examiner, I'm not looking at I'm not scoring the product for its quality. I'm scoring for the product to make sure that it aligns with the goal. For this one here, we don't have evidence of the product because it's this sample is only for Criterion A. Okay, so all right, so I decided I wanted to work on social media's effects in our society and relationships. Great. It's a great topic for me because as a teenager born in 2001, I witnessed just how fast the internet and social media became popular and how it changed our concepts of friendship, socializing, and communicate. Okay, so already we're starting to see, again, some more personal interest, who this person is, and then why, and what their concerns are. And then, so again, I'm going through, I never considered these changes to be bad or harmful, but over time, I started to realize how we as a society came to the point that sometimes it is more fun for us to scroll down on social media than to go out with friends or spend time with our family. Getting likes on a photo that we share became more important for us than the memory it represents. All right, so already we're starting to see sort of this student give a little bit, this is actually much more, a little bit more of the global context, I think it is. But we start to see the goal, it's in like why it's important. I often in this section, like my students to give some research, like back up and like really make that connection between their global context and their goal and sort of validate why this is such an important goal, not just because they said it is or because they have to do a project for school, but what other experts say. All right. All right, so we have questions about this personal interest is contrived, and this is another questions about the challenge as well. We are not able to determine that. Like we need to trust our students that what they say is what they think and what they believe. Like if a student, we're going to get down to the challenge in just a minute here. But I think that what's really, really important for us as examiners to understand that if a student say it is, like we just have to trust that. And then we have to determine, we are not allowed to determine whether a student's goal is challenging or not if they've said that it is to them. Like we don't get to judge whether that's challenging for that student. If the student has said it's challenging for them, then it is. What we need to look at is how well they develop the explanation of that challenge. Like if a student says that they are shy and that their project isn't like enabling them to, they have to go talk to multiple people, interview people, they have to really interact with people, and that's going to be a real challenge to them. As long as they're identifying that, then we can't judge the challenge itself. What we are judging is whether or not the student has developed the explanation of that. And I hope that makes sense. Like this, I mean, if somebody is making up something, then I mean, how do we know? No, we just have to trust that what the student has said is what they said. Just looking at a couple of questions. We'll talk about one person giving a 6 and another person giving a 3 in just a minute. Let's invite other people in. Okay, so this student goes on, and I think this is where they've given sort of all sort of their personal interest is in this part. So what I would do at this point is I would start to go back and I would start to look at the criteria. So the student needs to, I'm looking at whether or not what has the student done? They've certainly stated that they have personal interest, right? Have they outlined it or have they sort of developed it, right? What is the difference between what that they've done? I would also go back to my command terms and make sure that I understand the difference between sort of state, outline, and develop. But develop is a hard one, I think, but it's there. And the command terms, if you look at the Padlet, I've given actually a list of all the MYP command terms. So I would say actually this student has made a very clear personal interest to this topic. They have maybe not made it as specific as I would like to see it. And for me right now, I'm going to put that in between a 5 and a 6. Again, I'm sort of putting down my thoughts as I go along, but I don't want to be definitive until I look at the very end of all of my scores and all of my levels. But I would say it's definitely here around a 5, 6. All right, we're up to 80 people now. Great. So then I'm going to go down now and see what else that we have. So this person is still talking about relationships, right? And the social media and their use of this. So I made a decision to change my utilization of social media and use my personal project to create awareness for others, okay? So again, the students put this in the context of when they were born, why social media is she or he believes it's harmful, and whatnot. So this student wants to use social media and to create awareness. After deciding on the topic, it was easy for me to link it to a global context. I chose identities and relationships due to the fact that I was going to explore the changes in our relationships as a society, as well as strengthening mine by using social media to a lesser extent. Okay, so here we have that connection with a global context. What I really like to see for the highest levels of the band for global context is the students really go into those explorations, and that they often, they make those connections very, very explicit. I think what's really helpful is if a student puts their goal first and then explains the global context. But the student has sort of given us a little bit of context or sort of conceptual ideas, that personal interest first and then gone into the goal. So at least they've identified it, they've stated, and they've developed it a little bit into why it's important. I would like to, we'll see if we see any more of that global context later on. So the goal I set for myself was to create a set of drawings to create awareness in our school about how our relationships of humans have been affected by social media. Okay, so here's the goal here. They've done a little bit more. I wanted my products to be striking and to visualize the issue in an eye-catching way. And then they've talked about the challenge of that goal in just a minute. So here, I already have some concerns about this goal. One, a set of drawings. I want to know how many. I want to know what medium media the student's going to be using with those drawings. I'd like to know a little bit more about the topic, how our relationships as humans have been affected. Again, who's the audience of this? Again, looking at those SMART goals, which I think we're all very well aware of. But again, I just don't think that this goal itself, I don't know really what kind of artwork besides a set of drawings. I don't know how many. The content isn't that specific, and the audience certainly is not identified here in the goal. The student has said a little bit more that they want to raise awareness with their peers or their school community, but I would like to see that very, very, is that everybody in the community? Is that teachers as well? Is that faculty? Be very specific about the audience members. So for this one, for the goal itself, I'm going to say it is based on personal interest. We have that, but I think that the student has only outlined a goal. I don't think that they've made that specific enough to get to that in level 5. So for the goal, I would give that a 4. And then I know I'm switching back and forth. You guys are great. I'm going to open up for questions in just a minute. And then here we go into this, the challenge. Reaching my goal was going to be challenging. Great. Put that word right in there. Let the examiner see that. Because I needed to work on a professional level to create remarkable pieces, which require a lot of patience, attention, and time. I did not want to create only one piece of art because I wanted to capture different aspects of social media, so I decided on 3. Okay, so already we have there 3. That's great. And again, what does a professional level mean? What does remarkable pieces mean? The students have used a lot of modifiers here, but not a lot of specificity. I feel like the challenge is quite general. I feel like they've sort of stated that, and then again outline that, but they haven't made it specifically why it's challenging for them or why it might be objectively challenging for anybody. So again, that is going to be a 4 for me for the challenge bit. If you look at all of my scores now, and if we go back to what we have here, we have 4 different things that we're looking at for criterion A1. Personal interest, global context, goal, and challenge. And I've given them, for personal interest, about, let's say I had a 5, 6, but probably a 6, a 5, a 4, and a 4. And now I need to create a holistic level for just A1. And for me, with a 6, a 5, and a 4, and a 4, that's going to be a 5. So again, we have all these, it takes time, but then I feel like when we take that time to do these personal projects and we ensure that we have gone through each part of the strand and we've used evidence to look at those strands and then to justify our levels, then we have we've made sure that our levels are accurate. So what I would like to do now is I'd like to come back as a group. They are 77 of you, now 79 as we go through. I've got a few questions. If you want to put a few questions in the chat, I'll just put a few questions and then we can comment and answer them. I've got, say here from Shiraz. Hi, Shiraz. If one person is giving a 6 and the other is giving a 3, what level should be awarded? Well, what certainly should never happen is we should just meet in the middle. That's never, ever the idea. The idea is that each teacher or each sort of standard moderator should be looking at what is the evidence that's in the personal project report, that's in the appendices, that say, okay, what do we have here? And then using the command terms. It's evidence and command terms. I didn't go through this report also has some appendices in here, and there's very, very little on the goal, or this part, this A1. The student had only put some comic strips and some comic artists that the student was that they used for inspiration, but they didn't really add much to what level that we have given for this. Remember, appendices can be used in order to give our final levels. Question here from Widya: if you end up with a level 5 or 6, how do you decide? Again, remember, we're looking at the different strands of that one criterion A1, and so I would go through and I would say, okay, if I give it a 5, it's still a 5, and if I give it a 6, it's still a 5. So I think, like, and then in the end, then that doesn't necessarily matter, but you need to look at sort of holistically what would work then, and oftentimes that comes at the end. Then what would that look like? Best fit and always in favor of the student. I mean, for the most part, yeah. Like we want to give the students the benefit of the doubt, right? Remember, an MYP works like that. MYP is not something where we start with 100 points and then we subtract from that, right? We always sort of start what the student can do, not what the student can't do. So we always want to give as most credit for it. And remember, as far as the personal project report is concerned, the evidence can be anywhere in the report, and we have to give credit for it. The organization strand comes in criterion C for communicating. So if it's unorganized, if it's not in the right place, we can look at that for criterion C. But otherwise than that, like if it's in the report somewhere, we have to give credit for them. So what would your comments look like? That's excellent. So comments, remember, have to be using evidence from the text. So comments should never be using the actual descriptors, right? That's what circular logic is, right? The student didn't, I'm just gonna go back to the scripture. The student didn't state a goal because they stated a goal, right? We have to go back and we have to give evidence for that. You can't say the sky is blue because the sky is blue, right? We have to say the student, received this level 5 because although personal interest was developed, the examiners would like to see more of that being specific, with specific examples and details to why art is so important to the student, right? Or something along those lines. So you would often give examples in the sense, you would give your evidence in your comments and your justification in your comments. So in each strand, we look at the components. Yes, so in each strand, you absolutely, and this is how, when I have my teachers do the moderation within, my Google form has an A1, A2, A3 level, plus a final criterion A level, right? It has a B1, B2, B3 level, plus the final criterion B level. So that's how, as an examiner, that's exactly how I do it too. Right? I don't just give a B level and go from there. I have to go through each one of the strands, and each strand we have to pick out the different parts that are in that as well. We have questions as well. Let's see. Understand how much the supervisor can help. Remember, the supervisor's job is to go through and help with the process of the personal project. The supervisor also needs to read the draft of the report and give comments back on the draft of the report. Just like with the diploma, my personal project supervisors only look at one draft and then give comments back. Those comments do not have to be written. They can be verbal comments for the students, but again, you're looking at using the criteria in order to then give comments back. And I would go through the criteria. if you go to my website as well, and Lenny's I know too, has checklists to what each section should include, and it's very, very explicit, more so than the further guidance. And the further guidance is great. I mean, I don't want to not give credit to the further guidance, but I've literally gone through and given exactly the checklist about what needs to go into that report. And my website is on the Padlet as well. My grading template is on the Padlet as well. You can look at that. I've actually done the further guidance and made that into a Google Doc, as well as my checklists are also on the Padlet. Can you explain the difference in achievement level and grade descriptors? Well, achievement levels are the number that corresponds with the grade descriptors. That's the descriptor in words and then the level. And again, numbers are just what the NYP or the IBO has decided that those equal. The descriptors are what's really, really important. I mean, the IB could have decided that, you know, to state equals 3 dinosaurs or equals a flower. Like, the numbers don't actually mean anything. It's the descriptors that are the most important part to it. That's how we defend it. And again, like, you know, I've worked in the German system as well, and the German system where 1 is the best, right? And so again, it doesn't matter what levels that we've given them as far as the numbers are concerned. It's the descriptors that mean the most and important for it. So the final is out of 32. The personal project is, those levels can change. When you go through, when you get the personal project, the standardization, the report that come, the subject reports that come out, usually, I think they came out, usually, yeah, they come out in like November, I think. The grade boundaries can change. For the most part, I think personal project has stayed the same for the last few years, but depending on the cohort, those grade boundaries, like a 7 can be a little bit different one year than it is another year. If any of you are in the diploma, you would know that from your IAs and your exams as well, that sometimes the 7s or the 6s, like, they can change a little bit. So for how we give final levels to our students as a predicted grade. So we give the 1 through 32, and then we predict this will be predicted a 5 or predicted a 4. And then the students will get their final levels out I think it's in November this year. Again, grade boundaries are on the subject reports, and those can change every year. Thanks for the dinosaur line, right? Doesn't matter. Flowers, everybody gets dinosaurs. Yeah, it's great. It is important that everyone marking the PP in your school is familiar with the IB. Yes, and absolutely. And like, standardization is one of the most important practices that we can do as IB schools, whether that's in our subjects or in our personal project. We need to understand what our command terms mean, and we need to understand the difference in our levels. You know, what does a 7 look like in an INS class in grade, in year 5? That's very different than what that might look like in year 1. And I think that it's really, really important that we take the time, and that our coordinators can take the time in order to give us the time to standardize within our subjects. Somebody asked the difference between standardization and moderation. Standardization is what a school does in order to come to a common understanding of what levels mean and what the command terms mean. Moderation is what we do for a personal project when we send our work out. So moderation happens once a year, and it's with the final reports. And then standardization is it's a continual process. You're doing the same thing, but they have different outcomes. How many more years we have this guy? Well, that's a great question, because right now, the new personal project guide is set to come out in 2021, I believe, August 2021. But who knows what will happen now because of, you know, current situations. I know some subjects have been delayed because of it, and I don't know if personal project will be or not. At least for the next school year, we will be on this guide. Some of us have talked about, some more questions about the process journal. Remember, the process journal, I like to refer to it as a portfolio. I talk to my students a lot about how, like, journal, I think, is a misnomer, and I think it can be confusing for students because they feel like they should be handwriting things in like one text. And really, the process journal is a collection of all the evidence that the student has done throughout this process, whether that's interview notes, whether that's research notes, source evaluation, whether that's videos of them, whether that is, it's so vast and so broad depending on what their topic and what their product or outcome will look like. The evidence or the extract that goes in the report is 10 pieces. Or I should say, sorry, it can be more than 10 pieces. And this was a confusion on the Padlet. It's 10 A4 pages maximum. But those A4 pages can have multiple extracts on each page. As long as they are legible. When they get too small, moderators won't look at them. We just don't have the time, and it's too frustrating. So they have to be legible on the page, and they have to be referenced within the report. So if a student is putting them in the extracts, in the appendices, then they should absolutely reference them. I also ask my students to make annotations on them. Like, they certainly label them, but they may also want to annotate them to make a little bit more explanation. And oftentimes their thinking is a little bit more developed after the process, so they understand what it means and why it's there. And the extracts are a really, really important part to the report, and they can certainly add and certainly raise the levels for our students. Okay. Those researchers planned an excellent written report with a simple product to be achieved high. Okay, so as far as the product is concerned, remember, the personal project is about a process, and sometimes their products don't work out. Sometimes they plan to do something, and because of limitations with, who knows, geography, time, skills, sometimes they just don't work out. And that's okay, because it's about the reflection and the synthesizing of their new learning within that process. If it's a simple product, that's something that's very different. And the idea that the students have to create rigorous criteria also matter here, because then they would score their product against their criteria. C1, I think it's strand 1 on C1, is about the product itself, and that's where the supervisor's scores can come in, and that's where they can be super helpful in the moderation process, because then the supervisor and the student together can look at their product and to see, is it rigorous? And that's kind of the idea, is where, like, simple products can be affected, like their levels can be affected, but only in C1. Significant races that are not explicitly mentioned in the body report that I use for tendencies. I mean, if the student, like, as far as resources are concerned, the student can include them in, like, we do MLA in my school, so that might be like a works consulted, like works that were consulted but not necessarily used in the report, and that can go on the list there. But things that aren't necessarily used in the report aren't useful, and I don't know if they should be included. Process of making 10 extracts and 5 pictures of product, or that's for the that's 2 different questions right there. There's 3 pieces that go up in for the personal project at the end. There's the report. Most of us do a written report. Some students can do an oral, which I think is more complicated, but it is possible. So there's the report itself. There's the appendices that are the extracts from the process journal, and then there's the evidence of the product. And the evidence of the product is very minimal, and that's only to ensure for the moderators that the student did what they said that they did, that it matches the goal that they set out to do. And that evidence of product also has restrictions on it. It's 30 seconds of video, it's 5 photographs, or it's 1 A4 piece of text, depending on what the product or outcome was that they should match. It cannot be a combination of those things. And that can be some video or some photographs. It can't be a 30-second video of photographs. It can only be 30 seconds of video if they did a video product, 5 photographs, or 1 A4 piece of text. And those are all uploaded to IBIS at the end. So it looks like we are just out of time here in our 40 minutes. If you still have questions, please put those on the Padlet that you'll see. There's sort of a pink one that also has the the presentation here. So just put your questions on there and I will try to get to those sometime today. So thank you all. It was lovely to see some of you and some of you again from my last session. And again, if you have questions, please put this up on the Padlet and we'll keep in touch. Thanks so much. Bye.